the wave there. Yeah, Kevin too. All right. BYOPB, I don't know if BYO is like a thing in Europe. Build your own, bring your own. But today we'll build your own project browser. We're going to talk about how is project browser architected, and if you want to extend it to do your own thing, we'll show you how to do that. So I'm Chris from Redfin in all the places on Drupal.org and GitHub and LinkedIn, that kind of thing. So you can find me. I'm the co-initiative lead for the Project Browser Initiative, along with my colleague Leslie Glynn, who also works at Redfin with me. And we've been with it sort of since the inception. Just after it was kind of originally written in a weekend by one person. And we've spent a few years cleaning up that quick prototype. So I did want to show you just sort of where we are at today and introduce you to some of the basic sort of fundamental concepts of Project Browser. And so is that big enough for folks? Can they kind of see the TV? I'll give it one little bump or two. So these extra tabs that have sort of shown up on your regular extend screen, each of these is more or less a Project Browser plugin. So I have two that are installed by default. The Recipes plugin, which shows any recipe that is already available in your code base. And then the Browse Modules plugin, which is all the contrib modules on Drupal.org. So you can come down here and you can grab a couple of modules, kind of put them in your shopping cart down here and perform a bulk action on that. And now the token and the path auto modules are installed on my site. That took a very short amount of time because token and path auto are already in my code base. So the only job Project Browser had to do was enable the modules. Happened very quickly. It actually happens quite a bit faster than doing it from the modules list screen because it doesn't have to wait and reload the whole screen and scan the directory for all the extensions. So if we jump over to something, I have so many things installed on this example site that I have a lot of stuff here. Let's see if I can get away with Smart Trim. So great, I don't have Smart Trim installed. So you can see that this operation is taking a bit longer. This is actually using Package Manager behind the scenes. It's copying my site into a temporary sandbox. It's running the composer operation to composer require Drupal/Smart Trim. And as long as that goes well, it's going to then rsync all of that back right onto the site that I'm using now. So it's safe, it's a little bit slower. And that's a lot of where we are today. To some extent, it doesn't seem that impressive because it's kind of like table stakes in a lot of other CMSs, but it's been a long time coming, and it's very cool that we can do this now. One of the things it does require is the web user needs to be able to write to your code base. So running this locally on DDev, very easy. Running this in production, a little bit harder. But we have some configurable options, so we can let people shop for modules, but then maybe open a ticket to have someone in IT actually add the module to their site, something like that. So there are some configurable options for Project Browser, config development Project Browser. So whether or not you can actually allow installing via the UI, you can just turn that checkbox off in a config split for production, and then people can shop, but they can't actually add things to their site. That's one possible thing. And then these here are the plugins, and what I'm going to do is show you sort of go over the architecture, go over our APIs, and show you how you would create your own. So that's kind of where we're at today. So the real question is like, why might you want to do this, right? So one reason might be if you have your own suite of custom modules that you use on your sites, but they're not really useful to the rest of the world. Maybe you work at a school, a university, higher education, something like that, and you have 10 different modules, or maybe you have your own set of recipes that just apply on your site, and you can allow people to enable your events feature or your registration feature, your donation feature that applies with a recipe, and you just want to only show those from your custom source. Maybe it's sourced from your GitHub, private GitHub, something like that. For example, we don't have a theme browser today, and we would create a new plugin if we wanted to make a theme browser. So the API I want to cover, and the first one I'm going to cover is the JavaScript API. It's the easiest one to cover. We don't have a JavaScript API. So you cannot actually interact much with the Svelte app itself, but it's completely decoupled, and that progressive decoupling, where we've kind of embedded this Svelte application inside of Drupal. So you can't really interact with that, but it is completely decoupled. So the backend exposes an API. You could write a completely different front end if you wanted to in React and connect to our APIs. So there is that option. We don't think you'll need to. It works pretty well as it is, but that's it. So the most foundational object here is the project object. That's everything that you can browse is a project. In the constructor, they're all required to be passed, but you can pass some as null. What do you mean?
You only need some of them. Like, a lot of them have default values, I think.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. Like, all are required to construct the object because you have to pass it, but you can just null or empty a bunch of them, or even, send some default values if you use names. So those are all in Project Browser project. So you can see here what they all are. For example, URL, the logo is not required. We'll use a fallback logo if you don't give one. And there's a bunch. The machine name, the body, which is the description of what it does, whether or not it's maintained or covered. A lot of those will just pass null by default. So it's pretty easy to kind of understand what they need. And then the one that I do want to kind of explain is the is compatible. So for Drupal.org, which is really what started us down this path, is being able to browse Drupal.org modules, what we wanted to do is primarily not show Drupal 7 modules. So we needed a way to say, hey, I'm running Drupal 8 or Drupal 9. So we wanted to tell Drupal.org's API to actually give us back only things that have some compatibility with my version of Drupal. So that is strictly required. Though of course, you could just say, if you were doing your custom thing and you know that it works with your particular distribution or now site recipe, you can just mark is compatible true on everything. You'll see that I did that when we get into that. So it actually is even easier than all those things because there's so many that have default values or that are empty or null or allow null. So there are some source plugins that you saw here that are come sort of with Project Browser by itself. We have 5 and we have 2 that we sort of turn on by default. We may be changing some of this soon. But yeah, contrib modules and recipes. There's also recommended add-ons, core modules, and local modules. The Drupal.org JSON API source plugin is all the contrib modules off Drupal.org. Recipes is recipes that are already in your code base. Recommended is kind of a new one, and it's actually really helpful. And in a lot of ways, it actually obfuscates kind of the, or gets away from the need to have to write a custom plugin, because I think a lot of people, the reason they would write it is, we only allow a certain subset of the Drupal.org modules in our installation, and the recommended plugin will let you do that by just sort of setting an allow list of what modules are allowed. And then core just shows core modules that are in your installation of Drupal. So it's actually just scanning the local file system and lets you enable them. And that's sort of a step towards a later vision, which is, I think we can replace the list view and use Project Browser as the module management in the future. We'll see how that flies, but it's my vision. So the way that you create your own source plugins is you extend Project Browser source base, or you can implement Project Browser source interface directly if you're hardcore. That's the caveat. That's said by our own Adam here in the front row. He's a Lego figurine. All right. The other thing that's kind of interesting is in a lot of Drupal, we always think about take the base class and extend the base class. That's not really the model that we're going with on ours. So if you wanted to take the Drupal.org JSON API plugin and extend that, you wouldn't actually extend it directly. You would make your own that extends the base class, and then use the decorator pattern if you wanted to extend an existing class. I had to go and figure out what the decorator pattern was in order to fully understand this, but in the simplest terms, you implement the base class, and then you instantiate an object of the one you want to extend, and you call its methods and manipulate it from there. In a nutshell, that's what it is. So it's a also fine, clean, easy way that you can extend the existing classes from Project Browser. And we use this pattern in local modules, the included plugin there. So if you wanted an example of that, you could use that. All right. So when you do a Project Browser source, when you extend that class, you need to provide the annotation. The annotation is pretty simple. And I think, can we use attributes now?
It is an attribute.
We use attributes now, yeah. So I was looking at the annotation class, I think, to do this, but
I think we might have ripped that out.
yeah. Or I just called it annotation instead of attribute because they both start with A and then a double letter. It's like really messes me up. But there's 3 required. It's pretty simple. You need an ID for your plugin, a label, which is sort of the short text, and a description, which is just kind of more like a 1-sentence description of what this does. And those translate onto this page. The ID, of course, is the machine name. This is the label. This is the description. You can also, and generally want to, provide a local task as well. If you do not provide a local task, it will not show up as a tab on this page. So it is possible to kind of create a browser if you want, but just get to it a different way and not from here if that was valuable to you by just not specifying it as a local task. And then a deriver if you're actually sort of trying to create like a repeatable pattern of these plugins based on something else. And then now we start to look at the Project Browser source interface. So here's one of the big methods. This is kind of the entry point for your plugin, which is get projects. And that is the method that actually returns 1 page worth of projects to the Project Browser. And there's a helper method that I'll show you in a little bit that actually makes creating the page object really easy, and you can just pass in an array of projects. So get projects is going to give you this query array, and these are a lot of the keyed values. So these are coming from the Svelte front end and saying like, okay, I want you to give me page 2 of results, 12 per page. Here's the sorting. And then here are a lot of the filters that I may or may not have checked or set. So when you're actually doing the browsing, there are filters that you can use here. So I can search for something like token, and then you get sort of all the token related modules. And the sorting here is generally most relevant, so it's kind of coming back from however Drupal.org has it configured in Solr to use a search key phrase. So title is an important factor in that. So token by itself is most important, and then you get some others. Popularity is a factor. So we try to give these results back to you in a sensible way. So the rest of these are the filters. So you're getting the query in, you're selecting all the things you need to select, getting 1 page of those results, and then shipping that back to the front end in a project's results page object. The other one is when you're defining a source, you actually get to say what filters are allowed. So you can see here that there's kind of a few filters here on the module browser, but on the local recipe browser, there's just a search field. The drop-down's not there with categories, the maintenance status, because this is just your local site. They're already available to you. We don't care about that stuff. So get filter definitions is where you say what is an allowed filter for this. And when I get into the example code that I wrote, we'll see how this kind of plays out. And then if you really want, the source interface will give you sort options as well. So you can change what sorts are available for your plugin. And then there is get plugin definition. That's pretty much inherited from either one of the interfaces or just for any generic plugin. You generally don't need to worry about that one because the base class implements it for you. So unless you're really messing with the plugin definition, which I can't even think why you would do that, you don't really need to worry about get plugin definition. But I wanted to fully cover the interface. So those are all the things in the interface. Now the project browser source base class is always the one that you're going to extend. So, reminder back about that decorator pattern. If you like everything the recommended plugin does, but you don't want it to be a YAML file, you want it to be an XML file, you would still extend the project browser source base and then use the decorator pattern to kind of manipulate the recommended plugin. So, one thing that is really cool is that project browser sources are configurable. There's not a UI for their configuration, but you can edit the YAML files or use drush config edit, and you can change things. So that recommended plugin, for example, it'll actually take anything that's like a file stream wrapper. So you can give it a URL or a path to a file, and that's where you can actually have your allow list of the modules it's going to recommend. So they're configurable. And then get sort options in the base class. We provide sorts for alpha, ascending and descending, newest, most popular, and relevance or best match. So unless you don't like those sort options, you don't really need to deal with get sort options, only if you want to change those defaults. And then there is another method called create results page that I was talking about earlier. You can basically just deal with these project objects, build an array of project objects, and pass that to create results page, and it translates into what the Svelte front end actually needs. So that's a great helper method that's in the base class that you can use. So what does that actually leave you with? There's probably two methods that you need to implement in order to create a project browser source. So it's pretty easy, all things considered. We'll see, because you do have to deal with all those various query parameters. But so you implement get projects and get filter definitions. And the fewer filter definitions you have, the simpler your get projects actually is and can be. And you can potentially override get sort options if you don't like the ones that the base ships with by default. So before I go into the demo, I will just talk about one other aspect of our API that I would think you probably would not use or care about. And those are activators. So abstracted away from the project object is any understanding of whether or not that project is actually enabled on your site or disabled or what its status is at all. That is sort of outsourced to this activator class. So activators are just services, and they're tagged with project browser.activator, and they implement activator interface. This is what a tagged service looks like. You just literally put the tag on it in your services YAML and say that it's a project browser activator. So the activator interface, if you were to create one, just has these three methods on it. Get status tells you whether or not that project, whatever it is enabled or disabled. There might be a third status in there, like in progress or something. I can't quite remember the enum now. Then supports. So back on the project object, one of the things you can pass is a type. So you can say it's a recipe, or it's a module, or someday it's a theme, or it's a single directory component, right? The activator says, yes, I can deal with modules, or yes, I can deal with recipes. And so you get a project, you look at it, you say whether or not you handle activation of it, and that's it. And then activate is the act of how would I enable this on my site. So for a module, it's like turning the module on. For something like, let's say we did have a single directory component browser someday where you could actually go into a contrib space and grab some single directory components that you could add into Canvas. Activating those maybe is just, I just need to flush the cache, right, or one particular cache, the registry, so that it knows I've downloaded a new one. So for example there, the activate method would just flush that particular cache. That's how it activates a single directory component. So that's kind of why. So if you're dealing with modules or you're dealing with recipes, we already have activators for that baked in. So good. And then extending activator interface, there's a tasks interface and an instructions interface. And the tasks interface is basically just gives you this bonus option of having tasks here. So after a module is installed, you can configure it, go to its help page, or actually uninstall it from here, from Project Browser. So the activator also handles providing that list of links to do these actions. And the instructions interface is similar. If you turn off that checkbox of allow installing, then the install button actually becomes a modal that gives you your instructions for how you, like the composer commands that you would type, kind of like Drupal.org does at the bottom of the project page now. So that's kind of the fallback behavior where you can shop but not check out projects. Okay, so let's look at how we might actually build one of these things. And so, fair warning, I hate that I'll even say it on a recording, but I just had the AI do it. So I have no intention of sharing this code, but I know it works well enough to demo it, so that's where we're at. So let's hop over here and let's switch it out to my source. So I had this vision in my brain that I was like, well, I'm just going to keep my list of modules in a Google Sheet, in a spreadsheet on Google. And I'll just keep that CSV sheet up to date. I'm managing that with like a completely external process, and we'll show those projects from that sheet in my source plugin. So that's one way you could do it. So the first thing that we'll look at is, here, the attribute. I keep wanting to say annotation, but it's an attribute. Like I showed before, it has an ID, Google_sheet_source, a label of Google Sheet source, and then a description, which what does it actually do, and then it does have the local tasks. So we should see this when we enable it show up on the extend page as one of the tabs, a new tab there. I have some, privates here, like a CSV URL, an array that stores my categories inside the object, so that because I'm fetching them from a list in the CSV. Construct, create, but get projects. Like I said, that's really the only other method that you need to use. So this is all in a big try catch. Thank you, Warp AI. It probably put a lot more error catching in than I would have. So it gets the raw CSV from the Google Sheets URL. I had to set the Google Sheet to like anyone with the link can view, and then it worked to fetch a CSV. Helper method to parse the CSV, and then it iterates through each row and calls a helper method to build project. So that's taking the array of my Google Sheet and turning it into a project object, and then building up that array of projects here in this array. Then it applies, so it fetches everything, and then it will apply the search filter to find things, apply the category filter, machine name filter. It intuited that that's a useful thing to do, but I don't actually have that exposed. Is there a reason for this? Like to be able to get a specific project by name?
I don't know. I inherited that.
Yeah, this might be a thing that's still kicking around, but the AI detected it and wrote it in. And then you've got the total. You apply the sorting. It has this little helper it built in to calculate the relevance score based on whether or not it's exactly equal, starts with, or just contains, and it changes that. So if you're sorting by relevance, then it sorts them, and then it applies the pagination, so it kind of array slices out what you want. And then this is that final helper method that calls create results page, and you just pass it in your array of projects. And you can pass it a total, but if you don't pass it a total, it will just array count on the one you've passed it. So that's kind of it for that. And then, of course, get filter definitions, the other one. So we let you sort of define your own filters. We have a handful of categories that you can use. Not even a handful. Three-fifths of a handful, I think. We have text filters. We have multiple choice filters, and we have Boolean filters so far. Patch is welcome if you are building one of these and find that you want like a radio button filter, or that might be a flavor of multiple choice filter. So I don't know, if you find another thing that you need, then patch is welcome. So that's it. Everything after this is just helpers: get raw CSV, parse CSV, build project. These three I don't even know, useful. So that's it. There's the attribute and the two methods. So I'll show you kind of what I did here. I just built out, this is not very large, but I just built out a Google Sheet that had all the same properties of the project object, and I left a bunch blank that didn't matter. And I just filled it out exactly in the order the constructor needed, and then I said, hey, here's a sheet, Mr. AI, go and build this out. So let's show kind of what that looks like. So we have the recipes and browse modules enabled by default. So because I have in the attribute a local task, a label, a description, I can go down here and configure it, and I can simply take my new, well, trust me, this wasn't here before. Now it is. I can drag this up, and I can even decide sort of what order it shows up in. So maybe I'll just make this the most important one. And when I save that configuration and go back over to the extend page, oh, interesting. I guess the order doesn't matter in terms of, because the local task attribute has a weight on it, actually. So the order you put them in is not super relevant to how they show up in the tabs. That's the weight here. I think it's actually, there was some other rationale for that, 2 years ago that we had thought of, that we're still overcoming a little of the tech debt from somebody who sat down and wrote it in a weekend. So here, the Google Sheet plugin now goes and it fetches my 2 rows from my Google Sheet. It's pretty cool. I can filter by category and just get one of them. I can search and get ones that match that. I can clear the filters and sort of go back to the beginning. So what's really cool here, maybe I have a queue of new modules that have been requested. We as sort of IT at the institution has reviewed them, and we say, yep, we're going to go ahead and add another module. I can just go over to the sheet and I'll paste that one in. So now I have 3 modules. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to reload this. Where is it? What happened, right? So something that is important to know is that we store the results of a particular search query in non-volatile storage in Drupal, not actually cache. I have an odd question for you, which is like, if I flush the cache right now, it works and it shows all 3, and I wouldn't have expected that, but someday.
No, I know why that's. I know why that's
All right.
the case.
Good to know. So, what you actually need to do to get it to not read from non-volatile storage, but actually go out and query the source again for that exact query parameters is you need to clear that section of non-volatile storage. And we do have a couple of ways that you can do that. There's actually 3, I think. 2 are useful, one's pretty undocumented. You can just save this page again, and that will do it. But really, you can go over here to the Actions tab, and you can clear storage here. Or you can run a drush command, ddev drush pbsc, and that'll clear all that data out. So I did it 2 out of the 3 ways. So reloading now, you see the spinner actually came up while it refetched the data, and now we actually have our 3 plugins. Adam's laughing over here. I'm so curious. What are your thoughts?
If I recall correctly, it's the thing that gets cached. So the project information, yes, that's cached basically forever until you clear it because it's very heavy to get, right? There could be thousands and thousands that need to be retrieved, so you just kind of never really want to lose them. The thing that is in volatile cache is the query results. In other words, the list of things that is in volatile cache. The actual information about the things that were found is in non-volatile cache. So I suspect, although we would have to test this later, is what you could have just done is search for cage. That would have been a new query that had never been seen before, and so it would have called out to find out.
That's what I was seeing. I was seeing like, oh, I flushed the cache and it showed up, but then I went to a previous search I ran that should have included it and didn't.
Right,
and
that's the thing. So you can actually just get away with not clearing the non-volatile storage.
Yes, depending on what searches you've executed.
If you've done like if you looked at like tens of thousands of modules, I wouldn't recommend it because you're blowing away a ton of information. But just do drush cr or whatever. We'll clear the query cache.
Yeah. So that is just one little sort of short, I don't know, pitfall or gotcha that you kind of want to be aware of. So, lessons learned. We're doing a pretty good job caching both in volatile storage and in non-volatile storage information about the projects in the query. When I originally, the AI did one better than me, and it also cached any request to the Google Sheet for 30 minutes. And that was driving me batty. I didn't realize it had done it. So I was like, well, then I was making changes and clearing the non-volatile storage, and it still wasn't giving me my results because it had a cache of that. So generally, you don't need to cache your results. We're going to take care of that to a large extent for you, especially the most expensive parts of it. But do clear your non-volatile storage, especially as you're developing or as you're adding new items to your source. Then you do want to extend project browser source base. Always, that's kind of the one you want to do, and you mostly need get filter definitions and get projects. You can override get sort options and a few others if you want. You don't really need to worry about making an activator unless, really, if you're activating like a completely different type of project, or I don't know if there's something incredibly special about your set of modules. I don't know what that would be, but that's it. And so I want to cover just sort of what are all the examples and what are all the plugins that we have. So there's the Drupal.org JSON API. That'll show you how to like really query another endpoint and get the data from there. So that might be a good model if you are going to query like GitLab or GitHub's APIs. Recipes is for locally already available recipes. Recommended, again, that uses the YAML file that's kind of like the allow list of modules that are retrieved from a URL. So that will show you, that's one of ours that actually relies on loading configuration and reading out of configuration. Local modules is a good one to look at that uses the decorator pattern. So local modules basically is just like Drupal.org JSON API, because we're fetching that data from Drupal.org, but we're just doing it only for modules that already exist in your code base already. We actually built that because the Drupal at the time, Drupal's Starshot trial experience, couldn't use Project Browser to actually like add modules to it because it was on a platform where the web user couldn't write to the code base, which again, generally speaking, is a best practice for security. So this was a good way to model what Project Browser could do without having to actually do the composer operations part of it. And then we also do have Project Browser source example, probably not one you would ever want to actually turn on. I think it literally fills with like dummy lorem ipsum data, but it's very well documented. There are inline comments, there's a README, and it is the documentation of sort of what I'm telling you today. So how do you implement, making your own plugin? And then, of course, we do want to consider testing, especially if you're going to write your own plugin. If you're going to contribute it back to us for some reason, like you decide, no, I'm going to make a theme browser, then we're going to require tests. So because we do have a Svelte app, we do have a lot of tests that are in the functional JavaScript test space. That's not really necessary for testing a source plugin. Most of those are in the kernel folder, and we use kernel tests to test those. So recipe source test, recommended source test, they all have their own tests. This is actually hanging me up. There's not a lot of people who love writing tests or are very good at it. So one thing that I have working but isn't contributed yet, and this is why I love DrupalCon, is because that's what I'm going to work on when there's people around me who know how to write tests, is I actually have a contrib recipes plugin that's functional. It'll go out to Drupal.org, fetch any recipes that are general projects, and you can hit install, and it'll download it, put it on your site, and then apply the recipe. That's all working, but it's not testable, so I haven't merged it yet. So I'm working on it. So that's that. Any questions you have in general about Project Browser, about creating your own plugin source, any of that, I'm open to. And then that is the QR code for the feedback forms. If you have any feedback for me as a speaker about the presentation, the organizers love to hear that feedback. And I think you can also get those links in your app later, but always happy to get that. So, any questions?
Thank you for the presentation, first of all. It's nice to see everything that is inside the powers Drupal CMS. I have a question about the existing source plugins that are already in content space. Have you tried any of them, like Project Browser GitLab, for example? There is a nice module already with fully functioning Get projects. And
that is awesome to know. I have not looked at that one specifically, but I was most aware that someone was writing that one. So a way to like go to your self-hosted GitLab and fetch your projects from there. I haven't looked at it. I haven't played with it. But at Redfin, we do self-hosted GitLab, and we have some of our own custom projects. So it might be something that I actually install. As soon as I build my new site template, I will include that one. But I haven't paid a ton of attention to what's out there in the contrib space, and I'm kind of surprised to hear it's already rocking and rolling.
Because also you showed that there are like these configuration methods in the source, and there is no UI for Project Browser from core or like nearly to core. But that one already even has the form for the configuration.
That one has a config form? Fantastic, man! I didn't even know that was a thing. Man, we got to look. Yeah. I'm real curious. Like, let's see what we get.
Type Google into Google.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of other browser stuff. It might be down there somewhere.
In the middle. Yeah.
Project Browser GitLab. Man, let's take a look at it. What is it? One site reports using this module.
Yeah, it's probably my site.
All right, I love it.
But I'm not the maintainer of there, so that's just my observation.
Yeah. Project Browser is under active development, so is this module. Don't expect a stable release before Project Browser reaches core, or at least stable.
Yeah,
it's usable.
Yeah. I am a little curious about whether or not Project Browser will be core, truly. We got package manager hurdles to jump before we even consider that, but something to be said. That's very cool. I would encourage Project Browser GitLab to make a logo so they don't get the fallback logo. A few more minutes. If not, I'll just take that as a sign that this API was so easy, so simple, that everyone's clear and they know how to do it now. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's very valuable. I'm glad you shared it with me.